Hello, good evening, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. Kevin is back. So many people have been asking, when is the next show? Well, here it is, and we've got the biggest story in the world, the Epstein story, burning out of control right now. It's going to bring down the government at this rate. We've got the Streisand effect. The more they're trying to hide it, the more attraction, more interest, the more people are wondering, what the hell is going on? Are these guys just actors? Are all politicians just actors who'll just turn on a dime like that? We shall judge them not by their words, but by their actions. So this evening, Kevin's going to give us his thoughts on this Epstein cover-up. We're going to go back to some of our original content that we did with Kevin, because many of the viewers are new and they've asked for Kevin to go into more detail about the disappearance of the kids when Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went to Canada, the Native American kids, which was one of the very first podcasts we did with him. And we've got a number of other subjects as well. But huge thank you for coming back on, my friend. How have you been?
Busy as hell, but in a good way.
Would you like to start with the Epstein side of this or the Queen?
Well, it's all connected, especially since Epstein is linked with Andy Boy. But let's recap, like you started mentioning about the whole, originally how I found out about this in working with Native people. And one fallen hero named William Coombs, this fellow here, he was a Native man held, like many, in these various internment camps in Canada, run by the Catholics, the Anglicans, my former church, the United Church. And William was in a place called Kamloops and Mission. When he was in Kamloops in October 1964, he witnessed Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip leave with 10 Native children. And these kids were never seen again. And I actually have the transcript, his transcript from the first event we had where we filmed him saying this. He said, I'm an interior Salish spirit dancer and I'm 58 years old. I'm a survivor of the Kamloops Indian School run by the Catholic Church. I suffered terrible tortures there from especially Brother Murphy, who killed 2 children I witnessed. I saw him throw a child off a 3-story balcony to her death. Another one he beat to death. He put me on a rack and broke some of my bones in the Kamloops basement after I tried running away. On October 10th, 1964, I saw Queen of England steal 10 children who we never saw again. I was 12 years old and was at the Kamloops school. The Queen and Prince Philip showed up all by themselves, and we got good food and clothes that day. Then they took a group of us kids with them and some priests to a picnic in a meadow at Deadman's Creek. We all had to kneel and kiss her boot. It was white and laced up. Then I saw the Queen leave the picnic with 7 boys and 3 girls from our school. We never saw those kids again. They were all from the smart group in class. 2 of them were brothers. They were Métis from Quesnel. Their last name was Arnold. I remember a girl called Cecilia and an Edward. My friend George Adolph saw that happen too, but they killed him a little while ago. Now, what happened in the wake of that, William went public with that, and 2 days before he was scheduled to come to London, England in February 2011, he was abducted by RCMP officers, taken down to St. Paul's Catholic Hospital in Vancouver, and he was dead within 48 hours. According to Chloe Kirker, the nurse who treated him, and again, we have her video statement and affidavit, he had all the indications of arsenic poisoning. He had what are called Mies lines on your fingernail where they turn all black, and none of the symptoms of tubercular meningitis, which the official death record said he died of. As it turns out, as the years went by, we documented this more. We discovered that Prince Charles at the time, now King Charles, ordered his execution. We got that from somebody who was in attendance at a meeting in Buckinghamshire when Charles's security advisor, Major Johnny Thompson, basically ordered the killing of William because he was a, quote, terrorist who was threatening the life of the royal family. And so that, connects Charles into the whole scene, but also his brother, because the whole Andrew situation with Epstein is yet another tip of the iceberg. Because I'll give you an example of that. Both all the members of the Windsor so-called royal family are heavy investors in what's called Rio Tinto. And they have the blood of other Native people on their hand. These 10 people were all murdered in one night in September 2022. 6 of the 10 were relatives of a Chief Wally Burns in central Saskatchewan, where discovered over $2 billion in diamonds. Well, Chief Wally Burns was the only band councillor who opposed the diamond mining. The next week, 6 of his relatives are killed by a lone gunman with a knife who then conveniently dies in RCMP prison. And the band council then go ahead and approve the mining by Rio Tinto. Now, that's a heavily owned Crown Corporation. And the Windsors profit directly from this. As a matter of fact, it was estimated that Queen Elizabeth, during her reign, increased her personal wealth by over 50 times. She was heavily invested in Inco, in all these resource corporations that are bleeding Canada dry and have for many years. And Andrew was, in fact, a go-between in this whole thing because he was a trade commissioner that set up these links with China, which is, again, one of the big owners of a co-investor in Rio Tinto. So wherever you find great wealth like this and the murder of Indigenous people happening, you always find that goes along with it child trafficking in a huge way. And, we know a little bit about his relationship with Epstein, a woman called Virginia Giuffre, if I can pronounce her name right. She was sex trafficked to Andrew by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Virginia Giuffre then brought a lawsuit against Prince Andrew that was settled out of court in January 2022. And yet, I don't know if you know this, but 3 months ago, she commits suicide in Australia, even though she was in a custody battle for her 3 children with her ex-husband, who she claimed had been beating her and everything. So what's interesting, Jeffrey Epstein, quote, commits suicide soon after this thing breaks. And then she commits suicide as soon as the connection with Epstein and others is breaking in the news. So, I mean, combined with the murder of these Indigenous people, William Coombs, these 10 Cree natives in Saskatchewan, the bloody trail is leading back once again to the Windsor royal family and Andrew in particular. So, this is kind of an overview of what we're dealing with, although there's a lot more to it than what we've described so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's frightening, Kevin, to find out that this network is just completely global, completely interlinked. European royal families, American politicians, you've got the huge corporations, the people at the top of business, military industrial complex, big oil, big pharma, etc. And they completely control the media so that even though they're just there behind the scenes doing all these heinous things to kids, the mainstream media is keeping everybody distracted and looking at other things and not thinking too deeply. Is that some kind of MK Ultra mind control operation they're doing on the population?
Well, when you think about it, Shaun, by keeping focused on particular individuals, that's part of the operation, because then people aren't questioning, well, what's causing it? Where's it coming from? Why does the whole system protect these people? That's the issue we always look at. And so you scratch the surface of any of this and a whole bunch of other actors appear. Another example of this is Prince Andrew was a graduate of a place in Canada called the Lakefield College School. And it's one of these elite preppy schools like you have in England. He was good friends with the principal there, a guy called Keith Gleed, who is an Anglican minister. This Keith Gleed was a convicted child rapist. And soon after Prince Andrew, who went there for a while as a young boy, and then he used to come back and dedicate buildings there and everything, this Keith Gleed dies under mysterious circumstances. Again, another quote, suicide, as soon as his link with Prince Andrew is established. And what's interesting, too, is that this Keith Gleed was an Anglican clergyman, and he's best friends with the guy who just retired as Archbishop in Canada, Fred Hiltz, who played a major role in shutting down the only dig that's ever happened. The only accredited dig of a mass grave at an Indian school in Canada is what we conducted in 2011 and 2012 in Brantford, Ontario. We were invited by the Grand River Mohawk elders to dig there. We found bones on the site of where eyewitnesses said they buried children. The bones proved to be those of children, confirmed by Smithsonian Institute in Washington. Fred Hiltz, this archbishop, good friend with this, child raping buddy of Prince Andrew's, he silences everybody and orders the destruction of all of this stuff. And so when you look at the whole web, you're right, it's part of this global network, but it's been around for a long time, as long as the British Empire has been around. And it always keeps going back to the same actors. But what they need to do, of course, it makes it look like, well, there are these bad apples. Don't forget, Prince Andrew was stripped of his various titles, his role in various charities. Before Queen Elizabeth died, they kind of used him as a scapegoat to kind of, like with Epstein himself, everybody vents their 3 minutes of rage on these individuals without asking the bigger question: why is it legal for children to be killed, for this stuff to happen, and people's wrists get slapped? You got to ask fundamental questions about what we're living under, and that leads to another subject we want to get into today, which is the alternative people are building to this corrupt crown corporate system, including in England, where they're on the verge of announcing a new sovereign republic like we did in Canada 2015.
Well, before we get to that, let's expand a bit more on this subject. So Trump and his team, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, etc., for months, some of them for years, have been campaigning on the release of the Epstein files. Pam Bondi said they were on her desk, etc. This was an absolute, of paramount importance to release these files, drives, legal paperwork, client list, whatever they had. The public deserved to have this information. Now they're all in power, and all of a sudden we're being told there is no list, there is no clients, there were no high-profile people using these girls. It's all been concocted. It's a hoax, Trump said. It's a hoax. And he's putting it on the Clinton or Obama era, Russiagate, that kind of thing, which is just a bizarre confabulation. So how can this crew of people who campaigned, promised their supporters that we're going to get to the bottom of this and put this information out there, how can they all be saying, nothing to see here, folks, move on, that abruptly and that condescendingly?
Well, that's the business as usual. Anyone who gets in power, I mean, it's the extent to which everyone on the ground had some mass delusion that Trump was somehow different than everybody else, right? It's been proven. And all of these things are opportunities to learn from our own experience. None of this should surprise people when they know, I remember I.F. Stone, he was a Washington muckraking journalist for many years, and he said, all governments are run by liars. Nothing they say should ever be believed. That was like after 50 years of experience in Washington, D.C., right? It doesn't ever change because it's not about the individuals and what they promise. The people who move in those elite corporate circles, it's like a radio commentator told me once in Vancouver. He said, these people pass children around like a good bottle of wine. They're totally protected. There's nothing you can ever do to stop it, right? It's that simple. The only thing you can do to stop it is change their system and get rid of the thing requiring that these crimes go on and that the elites protect themselves with impunity like this. So a point on when you mentioned Pam Bondi, she, before being Attorney General, she was a lobbyist for the private prison industry in America. Now, like in England, they have these corporations like GEO, that make a lot of money for everybody they lock up. I was just talking to a common law group in Texas where some of their members have been arrested and put away for 25 years for failure to appear in court. A misdemeanor suddenly gets in jail for 25 years because Pam Bondi and Trump need to criminalize misdemeanors to stick people away in prison for as long as possible so that they can make money for their corporate buddies, GEO. And, she's an investor, as is Trump, no doubt. We already know Trump International launders money for the Mexican drug cartels, who are the major, people trafficking human beings. So you remember when Trump began to separate the children of the, quote, illegal immigrants locked up in prison? A lot of these people aren't deported. They go into the private prison business, and they make a lot of money for people like her and him. So the thing to look at, you always say follow the money. money always acts in the same way. And I hope people learn from this and realize that we're dealing with a whole system. Forget about the personalities, they're hand puppets, including the people who seem to be in charge, right?
Yeah, so they have investments in the private prison industries, and every person who gets arrested, they get $60,000 in America of taxpayers' money per year per person. So it's essential for the growth of these prisons that more people are incarcerated and more things are criminalized. So they're just looking for any excuse to give people these long sentences. Kevin said these guys are getting 20-year sentences. Well, if you multiply 20 by 60,000, 10 by 60,000 is 600,000. That's $1.2 million of your taxpayers' money per year per person going into the pockets of these scummos who've got investments in the private prison industries. Anything to add to that, Kevin?
Well, it's a huge growing business. It's why ICE, the immigration police in America, are now the most heavily funded law enforcement agency in America, because under the hype of all the scare about immigrants, they're forgetting certain basic facts. If it wasn't for undocumented aliens in America, the economy would lose over $20 billion, because most of these illegal immigrants are the ones who work in construction, in the hospital industry, picking fruit and vegetables. So you're gutting your own economy when you do away with this labor force, and prices are going to go through the roof, right? The other thing, too, is that under the U.S. Constitution, slavery is legal. In the 13th Amendment that the U.S. Congress and the government passed in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, it said slavery and enforced servitude is banished everywhere in America, except if you've sentenced in court, basically, if you're serving a sentence for which you've been lawfully convicted. That means anyone in prison is still a legal slave. It's why they either don't pay the forced labor or prison, and I know, having worked in prison ministry in America and Canada, prisoners are lucky to make $1 a day. It's this huge, over 11 million people now are legal slaves in America, working for nothing. You see them driving through Florida and Texas. You see these guys in orange suits, chained together, working on the side of the road, like in slave days. So that's the point. It's a new slave trade and slave industry out of which people like Trump and Biden and others are making the megabucks. And that's what it's all about, right?
So slavery was abolished under the US Constitution, except for people convicted of crimes. So they left a loophole whereby they could make people work for zero pay or pittance, provided they criminalized them. And a lot of the blacks and stuff, when they were freed, they brought in laws about loitering and marijuana use, etc., just so they could criminalize them to put them back into the prison system. But there is someone in the prison system I want to talk about, and I'm gonna get her picture up here now, and that is Maxwell, because she now is saying, well, guess what, folks? If the client list is a fabrication, then I didn't transport anybody to anybody. My whole case is a fabrication. Hence, I should be getting released immediately. What do you think to Galen's demand to get out based on what Trump and his cronies are saying?
Well, don't forget, like, scapegoats are always used first to distract and grab our attention so the real culprits and other culprits can get away. But once it's happened and the smoke is clear, they'll let them out. They always do. It's like when Catholic priests or archbishops and cardinals and everyone are caught killing and trafficking children, they farm them out somewhere. They put them on early retirement, and then a few years later, they're being moved around to some other diocese. I mean, it's how they take care of each other. So none of that should surprise us, right?
Exactly. So you're saying that when the story is not so popular in the news, then she's going to get out because she's probably protected, because we saw Jeffrey Epstein get unalived. We saw his other procurer, Jean-Luc Brunel, get unalived by the exact same means in prison in France. Yet Galen, who's been at the top of the pyramid, is still breathing. And it seems that she had a particularly close relationships with the Clinton crime family. What do you think about the Clintons' role in all this? Because people are saying there is no client list. I would personally, I would allege that Bill Clinton would be at the top of the bloody client list.
Well, don't forget, we're never allowed to see except things that these people want us to see. So I mean, even the talk of a client list, they don't need a client list. They can do whatever they want. They're above the law. So I mean, things like that are released as trial balloons and fog to just keep the real question not just hidden, but to give people a sense of being immobilized. Because if you continue to show all the time to people that these people are above the law and can do whatever they want, what is the effect of that on people? The effect is to feel despair. And what can you do? I get this all the time from people. What can you do? There's just too much to fight. That's mind control. That's part of a program. The individuals don't matter. I mean, if you put any of us in the situation Bill Clinton was in or anything, a good chunk of us would end up doing exactly what he's doing. It isn't like good guy, bad guy. It's what the system creates. And our whole thing is like, I believe, and I've seen this up close, that the system is so corrupt and so gone now that there has to be the thing's got to be flushed and we got to start again. And a lot of people on the ground realize that, right? But it doesn't start by always focusing on them, because ultimately they don't matter. I remember there was this great quote from the French Revolution. A revolutionary called Camille Desmoulins said, "The great only appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise." So when we rise and assert our own sovereignty and take back the world for ourselves, these people don't matter. We'll lock them up. We'll forget about them, right? But right now, when people are so divided and don't have a sense of their power, that it seems really important what these guys are doing. Ultimately, it's somebody said that revolutions happen when two things occur. The old system can't work anymore, and the people within it are so fed up they don't want it to work anymore. And I think we've reached that point morally and spiritually in the world. So many people are just so sick and tired of all this crap that we're open for something new. I see that everywhere. I mean, I had a friend in Chicago. He took one of my books into a Catholic church to try to talk to a Catholic priest about the policy of Cummin. Next thing you know, he's arrested. The priest calls a cop. My friend's taken down, given an order to appear. He walks into a room, there's a camera on him. And a voice out of the camera says, "How do you plead?" And he says, "What do you mean, plead? This is not a court." He said, "No, you have to plead." And he said, "I'm not. This is not due process. I want to face a judge." He's found sentenced in front of this camera. Got 6 months in prison, like for what? For talking to a priest about a book? Like that's how far things have gone. And it's the same in England. My friend Owen Lucas went through the same thing. He posted one thing on Facebook, the system didn't like. He's in Swansea jail for 3 months. No charge, nothing. We're living in a police state, right? So not only shouldn't we be surprised, but we should got to shift our focus away from the things that they're trying to keep our head in, this little bubble of issues that don't really matter, into what really matters is, how do we change this? How do we take back this world for everybody and stop these rich criminals from doing whatever the hell they want, right?
So you got a question from Anne-Marie. Do you think they are just throwing it in our faces to show us we are simply the plebs and have zero rights, that they are putting us in our place? I'm just going to crack a window open. I'll be right back.
Well, I'll respond. We have any rights we want to exert. You don't have rights until you practice them, right? And they're not putting us in our place. We put ourselves in our place. We think, oh, there's nothing I can do. But I'll tell you, we showed in Canada and other places in the world that if you persist and you don't back down, the system is an illusion that starts disappearing their power, because it is an illusion. It's fraud, and it relies on us thinking we're powerless. So that's why right now our focus is on training people, educating them, and mobilizing them. Because once a few of us start doing that, I mean, how do we force the truth of genocide in Canada? 24 of us. How do we force Pope Benedict out of office? We just never gave up, and we put it in their face publicly all the time. That's our power, right?
So Anne-Marie sent a follow-up question. Kevin, who would take first place as the most evil character of all the swamp dwellers you have mentioned so far tonight?
I don't even know how to answer that, because what's most evil? I mean, it's like comparing good and bad Nazis, I guess. I don't know. But the point is, like what the real evil is not what they're doing, because that's what, I've seen human degradation. I've dealt with the victims. I've seen this evil up close. That's not the evil. The evil is when we cooperate with it and do nothing about it. That's the real problem. That's the question. We should be looking in the mirror and say, what am I going to do now to link up with other people and end this, right? Because, there's an urgency here that I think a lot of people lack, and that is, look at where we're going. We have to create alternatives, and we don't have a future, right?
It's the whole apparatus, isn't it? When you've got a number of evil people coming together, working in unison, they can achieve, what they achieve is a multiple of what they can achieve individually. So it just generates this, becomes this big evil apparatus that's manipulating people all over the world and doing these horrific things to kids. And I'm sorry, go on, Kevin.
No. I was just thinking that when you were talking, that quote from Martin Luther King came to mind when he said, "At the end, I will remember not the lies of my enemies, but the silence of my friends." And I think that that's the moral issue, that we have to ask ourselves, what am I doing and what can I do tomorrow to lend a hand in stopping this? And it's a lot easier to stop than people realize, because these people, they hate exposure and they hate people acting on the exposure. Even just standing outside one of these Catholic churches, it makes the priests go ballistic because they know you're telling the truth. We know they're trafficking children and they don't want people to know. So, it's like in the art of war, you provoke your enemy to destroy itself. And it's so easy to do now because these are big targets we're dealing with, right? And they can't hide. So, it's an invitation to act.
Which ties into this question from Jason. What can we do to beat this psychopathic parasitic system? So you guys took to the streets, didn't you, Kevin, and went into the churches like you said and stuff?
That was an important thing to break the ice when we began to not only protest, but actually go into the churches. And with the help, we had a lot of advantages. We had hard evidence, we had witnesses, and we had indigenous people who had never ceded land legally to any of the churches. So they said, like they were doing already, we'd go in and reclaim these churches as reparations for centuries of murder of our people. The cops always stood back. I never had an incident once where a cop intervened and stopped us from doing this. They knew we were in the right. The law was on our side. The local chiefs had issued eviction orders against these churches. All of us can do that. Magna Carta, Section 61, allows anyone in England to seize all of the property and wealth of the crown if they violated the rights laid out in Magna Carta. We can do it legally. Just take back the country, start doing that. That's what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of protests. They're not afraid of words and interviews. What they're afraid of is acting on it and reclaiming everything in our own name. That's the whole basis of setting up these sovereign common law republics, and that we're doing it as we speak. So, that's kind of the short and the long version of what we need to do, but we need to take personal responsibility, and that's a difference because we can't wait for somebody else to do it, right?
So we've got almost 1,500 watching live across all of the platforms right now. And I just want to remind everybody that Kevin has a number of books out. We've got all of his links in the description box below this video. And it's very important. His life has been on the line literally with this over the years. He's had multiple attempts on his life. It's very important that we support his work. So you got book links down there, documentary links. Even his email is down there if you want to reach out and contact him directly. So we've got a question here from Katz. It feels daunting fighting evil alone. And as a woman, what advice can you give about who you can trust?
It's a difficult thing because in this day and age, the biggest problem is our own lack of trust and our own experience, especially if you've been traumatized and harmed, right? Never an easy thing. But what I have learned dealing with my own trauma and in my lowest moment, when I had everything stripped from me and I lost my children and livelihood and living out of my car, I realized what I used to do is I'd get on the bus in Vancouver and drive around to be with people, the energy being with other human beings, or that day when William Coombs came with us in the church and occupied it, when he couldn't go anywhere near a church without getting physically ill because of the way they had tortured him as a young boy. He was in there smiling, handing out flyers. He had lost his fear because he had all of our energy around him as a protective cloak. And we tend to be, the more aware you become, you tend to become more isolated because you don't find anything in common with the people you once knew, right? And your own family. You need to find a new family. You don't find it in the bubble of your own head or in front of a screen. You find it out in the world. And that's why everything we do is oriented on bringing people together. We hold assemblies. We hold common law court inquiries. We hold picnics. Just get out in nature, The Schumann resonance. The human brain is the same wavelength as that of the earth, right? Just get out on Mother Earth and recover yourself. Hold events where you're upholding those life-giving things. And it takes an act of will to get over that hurdle. Once you've been harmed a lot, it's very difficult. But with each other, we've proven that it works. So always look for those group responses, right, to what we're in.
I'm going to put the flag on the screen and then ask you the next question, which is, so with the new sovereign republic forming in Britain, tell us exactly why this is happening now and how the common law court conviction of QE2 led to it, like in Canada.
So I think I sent you the flag of Albion, actually. I don't know if you've got it.
Oh, we've got that one as well. Let me have a look.
Yeah,
a few flags in these emails.
That's our Canada flag. And 2015, we adopted that. And we've had flag raisings all over the country. It's great. We tear down the Canadian flag, and we raise this, reclaim the area. So.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. This one with the tree on it.
Yes. Okay. So.
Yeah, got it.
The story on this is, for a number of years, people have been talking about setting up a republic and really reestablishing the republic that, of course, was first created in 1649 when another Charles, had his head cut off. And for 11 years, there was a republic where the Act of Parliament in March 1649 abolished the monarchy in the House of Lords and made it an act of treason to try to reestablish the monarchy. So Charles II comes along, does a military coup, reimposes the monarchy, but that's not a de jure power. That went against the will of Parliament and the people. It's a de facto power. So the Crown of England has no lawful authority, in other words, and hasn't had, for centuries. So in the last few months, what's been a real spur, and actually, Shaun, our programs brought a lot of people out of the closet on this stuff. And there's now organizing committees working all around England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And they're going to be releasing a constitution very soon and a declaration of independence from the British Crown. They call it the Republic of Albion because that's from Alba, the Scottish, it's a Gaelic word. The stars represent England, Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Ireland and Wales. And the great tree of life. Now, these are in the memory of people in England. These are ancestral memories we're drawing on because it's the understanding that the rights of the people predate all monarchs, predate all statute. They're basic common law liberties to govern ourselves. And what's going on in England now is the same kind of police state as you have in America. This corporatocracy that disregards the rule of law and the will of the people. So it's a really neat thing that's happened because America and England have always had this cross-pollination going on. Like when the Republic was defeated, a lot of those soldiers of Cromwell's New Model Army, guess where they went? They went over to New England and America, and they helped create the vision of America, right? And then now from America, it's gone back across the ocean again. That's because common law has had universal jurisdiction. It lives in the hearts and minds of everybody, regardless of what the tradition in your country. So it's very exciting now because in the fall, we'll be holding events in England. They're going to be actually holding a first constitutional convention. There'll be a lot of news on that. I hope to be there, and which would be interesting because the last time I was there, as you know, I was deported from Stansted Prison, and some of the folks some of the folks in Albion said, well, we'll smuggle you in by submarine off the coast of Cornwall, Kevin. I said, hell no. I'm going to come through the front door. I'm coming, to Stansted or where they deported me from. And we're going to have people there. And we're going to film it. Say, you want to lock me up? Go right ahead. What am I doing illegal? It's you guys who are the criminals. And so we're going to be doing that in September. And there'll be a lot more on that. But I'm just really excited talking to these folks on these calls. They're wonderful people. Some of them are doing back to the land things. We've linked up with farmers in places around England that are. It's like the 100th monkey. People are all reaching the understanding that we need to be self-sufficient again and sovereign. So they're becoming food self-sufficient. They're setting up their own schools and pulling their kids out of these strange curriculum now where they're teaching kids about oral sex when they're 5 years old. I mean, all of these corrupting influences, people want to reestablish healthy relationships with the earth and each other. And that's what's exciting about this. People are doing it for themselves in England. And just like in America and Canada and all over the world. So I look forward to this, sharing more about that. And if people want to find out, actually, there is an email, Republic of Albion, one word, Republic of Albion at proton.me, like me, Republic of Albion at proton.me. And that's, you can reach the organizing committee and they can tell you a lot more. They've even adopted a draft constitution modeled on the American and the Canada Constitution, where, for example, they have no law can be passed in the Republic unless it's ratified by local assemblies of the people. So it's devolving power back into the local communities. And very exciting new ideas people are coming up with about how to make, self-governance and real democracy, direct participatory democracy, a reality and not just a nice idea.
So, Kevin, I know a few people who got deported from America and they give them some paperwork whereby, they're instructed that they are not allowed to come back into the country. They're blacklisted and it'll be on the computer system. Did you get any such paperwork when you were deported from the UK? Were you told you're not allowed to come back?
No, as a matter of fact, I was actually joking with the guards it wasn't a UK border agency. It was a company called Reliance Limited that actually runs, I don't know if they still do, but they privatized everything. So Reliance Limited gets money for everybody to deport. So naturally they use any excuse. But this guy who deported me and he filled out the paperwork and I said, so does this mean I'm banned for good? And he said, oh no, it's just a one-time thing. And it was hilarious because I went over to, my daughter was in London at the time. She was only 18 and I wanted to get back to her. So I try to get back into the country. I go to Ireland. They deport me back to Holland where I'd been speaking. I go into Ireland and I go in there and there's an old Irish guy at the immigration thing. And he says, you've been deported from England. What are you doing coming in here? And I said, we can't have you come in here. We have a joint agreement with the Brits, to deport people. And I said to him, why the hell would you have a joint agreement with the Brits? And he laughs. He laughed. And he said, okay, I'll do the human thing. I'll do the human thing and let you in for 10 days. Okay, 2 weeks. You can be here 2 weeks. But then go back to England or the bastards will lock you up. And I said, yeah, I know. Okay, don't worry about it, man. This is delightful, right? So I'm thinking that experience always teaches me that, there's so much goodwill, including among a lot of people in the system. We tend to think in there's this homogeneic kind of beast that we're all up against. It's not true. They're just people, and you can reach their hearts and minds, and we do it all the time. We've recruited Mounties and police into a republic in Canada, and it's an exciting wave that's building, but we need leadership. We've got to lead by example with this, and you find incredible support all over the place, incredible goodwill. So that's what we're banking on, right?
You had a few questions come in about on the subject of jurisdictions then. So Agent Orange wants to know, would breaking up the states and starting all over again be politically an option?
Do you mean America? The states?
Yeah, America. He's saying America, yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because in America, and this is kind of part B, the last, especially since a lot of these raids and repression is starting all over America again, there's a move to start holding constitutional conventions. Now, we know people now in 9 states who are doing this. And what's amazing about this, it's not Republican versus Democrat. They're actually uniting. There's a statement coming out, and we want to kind of coordinate it with what's happening in England so we can have a big impact. And it's saying we have to overcome these false divisions. We have to go back. There was a banner at one of these meetings that I did the Zoom call with in Cincinnati, and these folks were meeting, and the banner said, neither Republican nor Democrat, but American, right? And they're getting back to the source of what the Republic is, which is people governing themselves. A number of state constitutions, like in Pennsylvania, allow people to bring in home rule charters where the people can set up their own bodies and reestablish their own laws in their communities that supersede federal and state jurisdiction. That's the beauty of the American Constitution. It allows people to do that already. They just have to reclaim that. Now, against that, of course, is this huge corporate machine we've been talking about that has abolished the rule of law, abolished regular courts. And people are realizing, well, we need another revolution. It's like King George all over again. This guy in Washington's ruling by executive order, ruling by decree, but it's not even about him. This whole corporate system is based on a hierarchy. Nobody can question. Nobody can have sovereignty. People all over the world are resisting that. And in the States, they're going back to the roots and saying, well, we're doing like we did in 1776. You hold a constitutional convention and we set up our own courts. Because, before the shots were fired in the American Revolution, to give you an example, the Green Mountain Boys would go into Crown courts in Vermont and New England, chase the Crown judge out, and burn the mortgage deeds, because the Brits and the land brokers in New York were evicting all these farmers from their land. So they went in, and there's a cartoon of this Crown judge racing down to the dock to get on the ship to go back to England, because they chased him out of the court, burned the records, sometimes burned the court, and create their own courts. And that's exactly what's going on in Canada, hopefully in England, in America, all over the world, taking back law into their own hands, because that's what the founding fathers said you got to do. It's got to be in the hands of the people. That isn't treason. That isn't terrorism. It's the terror we're fighting, the state terror, that's breeding this all over the world. So it's an exciting time to be in.
We've got a super chat question from Lone Wolf. Thank you. Revolution is a young man's party. Sadly, our youth has been corrupted. They are apathetic. Why get a job and be a slave? Why help something that's broken? Black-pilled is the term. What medicine is there for that?
Well, I'll tell you something. In Birmingham, there's an 18-year-old man, and I don't want to say his name. He's one of our top organizers. This guy has fire in his belly. Okay, so that may appear to be that way, and I don't doubt that a lot of people, young people, are tied into the technology. That's the purpose of to make their minds literally a component of this machine, right? But there are a lot of people who aren't like that, and you're right. Revolutions tend to be done by people in their early to mid-20s, or even younger. But there's that youth in all of us, right? And we have to. Once people see an alternative, they'll start flocking into this movement. We just have to be bold enough. So the medicine is we ourselves setting an example and going out and finding those people, not relying on the technology, just go and find them all over. When you do that, you see a great yearning and a great outrage about what's gone on in the world. And there's a human striving to get back in the right relationship with everything. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful, actually. The young people I know, again, the church occupations, and most of those people were young Native guys, right?
So we've got a question from Meow. Will Alberta and Saskatchewan become part of the USA? I can't even pronounce that of the word.
Those are provinces. I think there's different. China is grabbing up Canada and the US for its resources and infrastructure quickly with Vatican funding, and so there's a move now to think, well, maybe being part of America is an option, but don't forget, when you're part of America, you're not part of the Republic. You're part of the corporatocracy. So what we say there, Canada, we already have as a self-governing republic within the borders of Canada, and so we say, no, you don't want to balkanize and split up. That's what China wants. They want to eat up all the parts separately. We maintain our national jurisdiction. We ally with the new republic forming in America, and across the border, we join hands. Just like we're part of this International Republic Alliance, we have people in a number of different countries who are doing the same effort, right? So we need that. It's almost like our version of the UN. We need this international connection of sovereign republics that's our answer to the corporatocracy, right? So that's kind of in a nutshell.
So we've got a question about France here, which has been in the news a lot with Candace Owens versus the Macrons. And Katz is wondering whether France is also hitting breaking point.
I don't know enough about France. I mean, we do have people that I work with on that, but the French, you see, traditionally are more willing to go to the barricades, as we know. In France, a number of years ago, there was set up a thing called CNTF, which was a parallel government. So I was having conversations with these folks. They're setting up a kind of a mirror image of a government. They have a number of people doing that. And that's a reflection of the groundswell that's happening. So yeah, it's bubbling up all over. And I think France might break quicker than a lot of countries, considering its traditions and how it sees, just the temperament of the people there too.
Anna wants to know, do you have any suggestions regarding how to organize peacefully grassroots, Kevin?
Not just suggestions, we have whole programs of how to do it. It started with this book. It gives you kind of the overview and background and how you can govern yourself. And this is an example from Canada, of how we go about doing it. You start, often you're by yourself in your community. So we say form a cell group, 3 or 4 people, start doing the education and the work. Eventually, when there's enough people, you form 12 or more people can sign a charter and form an assembly. You start meeting your community and say, what kind of laws do we want? What kind of crown land can all be seized? Anywhere in England or Canada or anywhere in the Commonwealth, you can lawfully seize it because the crown has violated its obligation to the people through these draconian laws. They are criminally convicted out of our common court trials. And so all of it is there for us to do. You just have to start organizing locally in these assemblies, and the assembly can lawfully form these common law courts. It's a long process. It's not something that you can do overnight because the problem wasn't created overnight. And you have to have a long-term view in this. Educate our children. That's one of the most essential things we do. Because the children are going to be pulled out. They're going to be leading this battle when I'm dust, when all of us are dust. They're going to be leading this battle. So the question, like Native people often say, don't do anything unless you think of what's going to be the impact 7 generations. Think long-term. We need a whole program. I mean, the adversaries have long-term programs. We tend to think in very short blips. Oh, we just need to do this and I can go back to my old life. That's not the situation. We need to transform society from the grassroots. It's a long-term effort. It takes education and discipline, and most importantly, something I see lacking a lot, and that's the will to do it, the determination to never give up, and that's what's caused miracles in my life and the lives of other people who don't have anything. So that's what we have to recover in ourselves, and that's a first step in how to do that.
So another subject area that we need to touch on tonight, I'll get him on the screen. The viewers are wondering about any developments in the common law court case being brought against Pope Leo, Robert Prevost, on September the 1st. Have more eyewitnesses come forward, and what are they saying?
As a matter of fact, I just did a call today with a woman who is in touch with a network of 6 women, all of whom were in these 9 circle ceremonies. This man, when he took his vow of a priest in October 1978 in Rome, right after they killed John Paul I and brought in number 2, Karol Wojtyła from Poland. They saw him, and as a matter of fact, one of these women claims to have been raped by him. It's one of the rituals you do. You see, he took an oath to the Catholic Church, and then you took a parallel oath to the 9th circle. When you do that, your name goes on the red list of future possible papal candidates. So he was a safe candidate to choose. We have now a network of these 6 people and 3 others, including 9th circle participants, who can testify that this man was present there, as well as being involved in the usual nefarious activities in, as an archbishop. He's referred to actually not as an American in Rome, but second Latin American pope, because he worked in Peru for most of his life. He signed a lot of agreements allowing China to come in and take out a lot of the minerals through the main port in Peru, which was in his archdiocese. So he's doing what Bergoglio did, his predecessor, making the China connection more firm, funding a lot of the funds there. But the important thing is we have now these eyewitnesses. The court is supposed to convene on September 1st. One of the reasons I'm coming to Europe to help the prosecutor office with a lot of this evidence. These eyewitnesses are going to be appearing at the risk of their own life. Some of them don't want to do it. Others are quite old now, and they want to go on record before they die of having witnessed this. And like I say, looking at this picture, never trust somebody who has to wear white all the time. That's why our work is looking under the robes and what the Vatican really is.
So these witnesses who've come forward then, knowing it's a huge risk to their lives, what's motivating them at this point in time?
A lot of guilt and shame, because don't forget, when you're in this 9-circle ritual, just to recap for people, it's a child sacrificial ceremony modeled on the Catholic Mass, where it's believed the blood and the body of the innocent redeems you. So they torture to death and rape and torture and murder these children, and then they consume their bodies and the blood. And to do that, usually this is an intergenerational cult. So Catholic families who are born into it, they usually sacrifice their child to gain admittance. You have to rape and torture to death your own child to rise through the ranks. And the other children they're used as for various things, to lure other children in, to be messengers and sleeper assassins in some cases. But these children, the witnesses who I've spoken to, every one of them, they all participated as well. This one woman who saw him and beneath St. Peter's grotto, where they do the 9-circle ceremony, she said they brought in a pregnant girl and handed her a knife and said, you had to cut open that baby. And if you don't, we'll kill you. And so she did. She said, yeah, I did that. And they often had to do that to other children. We've heard this before from Tos, Nienhaus, and other witnesses 15 years ago when we first uncovered the 9-circle. So, I mean, this is why people don't want to come forward, but it's also want to do the right thing. And there hasn't been a way for them to do that up till now, because there hasn't been this vehicle of our common law court. Every court, every police agency in the world shuts down any of this as soon as it appears. That's true, especially in Europe.
So Goretti wants to know whether communion in the Catholic Mass is a cannibalism ritual.
Well, it is, because don't forget, the Catholic doctrine says the words of invocation over the communion elements transforms it from wine and wafer into the literal body and blood of Christ. You're eating Christ, you're drinking his blood. So yeah, it's cannibalism. Even though Catholics are brainwashed to think, no, it isn't, but in fact it is. It's like the elephant sitting in the living room, And so it's a small step from there to the satanic Mass that does the same thing with the child, right? In fact, there's a close affinity to it. And I think they're just the mirror image of the same demonic process. It's why so many of my Protestant ancestors were burned to death, because we said, no, it's a symbol. It's not a literal. Because by saying it's a symbol, you're invalidating the whole satanic system running Rome and really running the world for many years, right?
All right, next up is a question about nuns from Haley. Because of all of the abuse from the nuns and the fathers of the church, do people think that the Catholic Church should say that it is okay to have abortions because they did 90 out of 100 of the abuse?
The Catholic Church pretends to be against abortion, but they're not. We know one of the early records I found in the Indian schools in Canada said they were encouraging abortions and they would abort and kill the babies of Native girls that they had made pregnant. There was one woman, Irene Fable, who saw a priest throw a newborn baby into a furnace in Saskatchewan in 1944 to get rid of the evidence of his rape of these young girls. So they're not against it, but why they come out against abortion is they traffic newborns, they even traffic babies in utero. Women in Vancouver I've interviewed, as young Catholic girls, when you get pregnant, the priest comes to them and say, give up your child to the church. We'll take care of it. You can't. You're morally degenerate for having got pregnant. We need your baby. So they hand over the baby. They sign away the rights to their own child. And this child is trafficked through foster care agency, adoption agencies. It's called the Baby for Adoption Protocol in Canadian hospitals. It's black marketing, trafficking in newborn babies and even in utero babies. And so naturally they're against abortion. It'll cut into their profit margin, right? And of course, often newborns are used in these 9 circle rituals. It's the preferred target, if you like, for these ceremonies, to use a newborn who are the most pure, right?
Which is exactly what happened to my mum. She wrote a book about it called The Blue Plastic Cow, whereby my mum's mum was jilted just before the wedding and she was pregnant. And the Catholic Church told her, if you have that baby, you will burn in hell, and forced her against her will to give the baby up. My mum was just left in a room with all these other babies on tables, just helpless, the mother-baby bond gone. But fortunately, in my mum's case, she was adopted by a lovely family. Well, that's not always the case, is it, Kevin? A variety of horrific things can happen to these babies.
Well, it's in the news again, the Cummin cistern in Ireland. And as a matter of fact, I just spoke to the guy who's documented there's over 20 other of these sites. The cistern containing the remains of 800 babies. And this surfaced over 10 years ago, and the government and the Catholic Church covered it up, of course, right away. But they keep finding these sites. Some of these skeletons, according to the Gardaí, the Irish police, they're missing heads, which are a simple, often a signal that they were used in ceremonies, right? But it's just a routine practice. And what I wonder here, Shaun, is how can people hear this and know what's going on and not go down to your local Catholic church and shut the thing down and arrest the Catholic priest? Because don't forget, citizen arrest laws say that if you even suspect somebody's involved in a crime, you can arrest them and hand them over to the police. Well, every Catholic priest in the world takes an oath to cover up child abuse in their policy, Cummin. Just look it up. We've reprinted it in the back of murderbydecree.com. We have the right to do this. And I say to people now, let that outrage and let that love for children bubble up now, because that's the only way you're going to stop these things, right?
So you're being asked by Lynn about your thoughts on Irish homes for unwed mothers.
Well, it's part of this whole network. I've talked we set up our tribunal in 2010 in Dublin, and I spent a week or more just listening to people's stories. A lot of them had gone through the Magdalene laundries, and where the death rate was as high as in the Indian schools in Canada, almost 50%. I mean, that's double the rate of Auschwitz and Treblinka. Half the children dying. Okay, and it's just everywhere. It was everywhere in the system, and still is. It's just a lot more hidden now, and institutionalized, because a lot of these things happen through the so-called child welfare system. We documented that well in England years ago, how there was thousands of missing children who had been put in foster care or in the system. They just couldn't explain what happened to them. Well, international trafficking and worse going on, right?
Samson wants to know, is the 9th circle the ultimate, or is the 13th circle or first circle, for instance, that are above them?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's for us to find out. 9th circle, for people who don't know, refers to the 9 circles of hell within Dante's poem, The Inferno, the 14th century poet Dante Alighieri. He said at the 9th circle, or center of hell, Satan resides, along with the souls of anyone who betrayed a sacred trust, like the trust of a child. And when you betray that trust and betray the innocent or someone who you love the most, then you get power, they say, right? So, and it was interesting because Dante himself was an associate of popes and cardinals, and I think he was describing literal events. So the 9th circle, I think, predated the Jesuits, who formally set it up and used it as a blackmail technique in the 1500s. It goes back to Roman times, because child sacrifice and animal sacrifice for the crops was a common thing. These are old Roman things, just recycled. So it's a good question how many of these there are. Go by different names, you know.
Marty wants to know, is Israel a front for the Holy Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem?
I don't know. You have to show me the evidence. There's different ideas about that, right?
Bernadine is wondering whether you can speak on the Grey Pope.
I don't know who they mean by that. Bernadine, you'd have to say who. I know, these titles, there's White Pope, Black Pope, Jesuit, whatever, but I'm not sure what the reference is to.
I'm having a quick Google. The Grey Pope is not an official or widely recognized title. It's sometimes used as a nickname for the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits.
Right. It's another name for, what they call the Black Pope. But I mean, again, these terms don't mean anything. They're just different hand puppets because the Pope has no authority in the first place. It's like saying, does the head of the mafia in New York have legitimacy and lawful status? Well, in their own club they do, but of course, if you have billions of dollars at your disposal like the Vatican, you can create any view of reality you want and people believe it.
So Secret Watcher's question is, I am an Aussie and have heard AU is a big country for this type of thing. How much do you know about how strong it is here?
Well, we had one of our biggest responses from people in Australia initially. And Australia and Canada are really similar. And they're on the front line of being targeted by China for its resources and their geopolitical position. But Australia has, because of the Aboriginal population, there are a lot of people that are easily disposable for a lot of these rituals and experiments. One of our best people there, Georgina Camera, disappeared after looking into how this was going on in Sydney, where there's a whole network of underground tunnels. Tosin Eonhorst described she was taken to Canberra as a young girl, taken to a military facility there, and not just tortured and used in Ninth Circle rituals, but used militarily. There were military experiments, mind control experiments going on. So that's the thing to understand of these rituals. They're not simply a bunch of arcane weirdos in robes. That's part of the cover. They're also tied in heavily to the military and the mind control and the big pharma research that went into the modern technology. They were looking at, there were pain threshold experiments to see how much the human mind could tolerate in the way of pain, but also they discovered more about the nature of human consciousness. I mean, I think I showed you that photo, and this was Georgina Cameron before she disappeared, had talked to people who had a similar experience. In the Indian hospitals in Nanaimo, the survivor says it showed a nanoprobe going right up their nostril into the midbrain area. And they said these were the experiments done on us in the 1960s and 70s to, like the same effect of a lobotomy, where the early lobotomies would go in above the eye and cut off the neurons and everything above there. The midbrain area, having to do with what makes us human, critical awareness, consciousness, even empathy, the limbic region of the brain. All of it's there, and it's targeted by these experiments. So it's all interconnected, all this stuff. And the best cover, actually, for these military experiments were often putting ideas in the minds of the people who survived it as you were picked up by a UFO, or you were used in a satanic ceremony, to conceal the fact that, no, it was U.S. Air Force experiments on us. And so all of that is thrown into the mix, and you got to distinguish between, like what it appears to be and what the real program is behind all of this, right?
Next question pertains to why are they trying to normalize kids being involved in sexual things? That's from EP.
Well, what genocide is, or in our case, omnicide, I do believe the agenda is to exterminate the human race and turn them into new, almost cybernetic organisms. To do that, you have to destroy human solidarity and the family. It's the basis of human strength, of who we are, is being raised in close association with the earth and with each other. And all of those horizontal ties are cut, so there's only one vertical tie tying you into the machine. To do that, you have to sexualize children, do away with age of consent, which the Vatican is all in favor of. A group in England called PI, Pedophile Information Exchange, which is run by some Supreme Court justices. They all believe in abolishing age of consent. You can have sex with a child, no problem. It's like in the Middle Ages, where children, in the Victorian era, where children are hanged for stealing bread because there was no age limit on criminal matters, no such thing as juvenile delinquent. So you want to do away with all of that, any distinction by sex, by age, anything, so that we lose our humanity quicker, right? And we become desensitized to each other and basic human values of life. So I think that's definitely part of it, right?
And we've gone full circle back to Epstein, because Epstein's lawyer, one of his lawyers, Alan Dershowitz, in 1997 argued against statutory rape laws and said that the age of consent should be 15. And he said 15 was he suggested that 15 was a reasonable age of consent, no matter how old the partner was. And he argued against punishing men who go with underage kids. And this guy's up there on the TV all the time on Piers Morgan and just right in everybody's faces.
It's disgusting. And, you know, it's a lot worse than that, too, because in Canada, about 5 years ago, they changed the criminal code, changing mandatory sentencing for child rape to 6 months in prison.
What?
You're out in 2 or 3 months. It's more of a crime in Canada to own a marijuana plant than to rape a child. Canada has the lowest conviction rate of child rapists in the world, the lowest rate in the world of convicted child rapists. So just before that, there was this whole drive started by the churches, started by human rights groups and everything, saying that children, if they consent, are not suffering from rape. Okay, so what's a child to do when an adult is standing over them? Of course they're going to consent because they're scared as hell, right? So it's normalizing, just the way in the 80s with Reagan and Thatcher, they began to normalize everyone to say what's good for corporations is good for everybody. You know, the whole privatization thing, they shifted the psyche, the human race, towards that. You know, I remember when the closed-circuit TV cameras first came in Vancouver, right? People were breaking them. They were spray painting them. They were saying, I don't want to be filmed, right? But, you know, a generation goes by and people get normalized to anything, including raping children as a norm, as a sexual orientation. You know, now, if that isn't enough to get people in the streets and jailing these people, you know, and stopping them, I don't know what is. You know.
That's absolutely sickening, Kevin. It's just, it should be it should be the most serious crime in the world to harm a child. Mm-hmm. Yet it's the lightest in the eyes of these elites and the justice system, because so many of them are participating in it, I believe.
And I don't believe that they're human. I think, you know, I mean, I've worked with people in prison ministry and elsewhere who are functional psychopaths. I mean, they kill people and kill children and have no regret at all. As a matter of fact, they feel like they're being persecuted. So you're dealing with people without any semblance of humanity. So naturally, they want everyone to be like that as well. They want to bring everyone down to their level, right?
Yeah, and you sometimes see these people when they get caught, and then they play the victim. It's insane.
You know,
all right, so Katz.
Yeah, narcissistic behavior does that, right?
Katz wants to know, how can Opus Dei rationalize SRA and cannibalizing babies as part of the holiness and Jesus light when it seems demonic and vampiric?
Well, we've already answered that. We don't, they're not human in the sense that we understand it, and it's all part of the doctrine. Children are born evil, don't forget, in the Catholic doctrine. You're born in a state of sin. You don't have a soul. You can, once you acquire the sacraments of the church and you're an obedient little drone, then you can acquire some humanity. But if you don't, you're a fair game. That's why the working policy in the Catholic Church is any non-Catholic, we have the right to destroy. Still, I mean, that's why, and I always cite this example, when Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, came to America, he beatified, turned into a saint, Junipero Serra, who was a Franciscan missionary who worked to death over 100,000 natives in California. Bergoglio, the great liberal progressive in the church, says, we are inspired by his zeal in killing non-Catholics. And that was in 2017. Okay, so the thing to understand is you're dealing with an institution that is all powerful because of its money, political connections, and thinks it has the right to do anything to anyone who isn't in their club. Now, when the mafia or somebody do that, people are outraged. Catholic Church can do it, no problem. That's the extent of brainwashing, and I think it's changing a lot. A lot of people don't go to church anymore, good, but, with all that money at their disposal, like 85% of the bank deposits in the world go through the Vatican Bank. People have got to bring this thing down in the grassroots, and you can do it. They're very vulnerable. Like Native people I always work with who go in and take back Catholic churches, tell them priests to get out of town. That's what you got to do. That's what they're afraid of, their money, losing their money.
Some of these people who are unaliving the babies have got a new term for it that they're trying to justify their actions with, and they're calling them demographic threats.
It's language, like Orwell said in 1984, control the language, you control everyone. And I don't know, like, to me, the mind can only go so far in this. And then morally, it's like great evil, like great goodness, great beauty, has no words for it. I can't describe to you the feeling I had when I delivered my children, my daughters, Claire and Ellen. There's no words that can describe that. And the idea of children being ripped apart, people often said, like, why did you do this work? And I said, well, I imagine my own daughters killed and lying in a ditch somewhere. Why would I be less outraged when it happened to another child? I wouldn't. I take it as a direct assault on my own humanity if I don't do something about this, right? And I think that's not rocket science. Anyone can feel that. We just got to feel more, get back to basic humanity more.
Put a 1 in the chat, folks, if you think calling a baby a demographic threat and justifying that to unalive it is just one of the most horrific things you've ever heard in your life. All right, next question. Are you familiar, Kevin, with this evolving lawsuit between Trump and Rupert Murdoch over this letter supposedly sent from Trump to Epstein for his 50th birthday that was bawdy and had a bawdy doodle accompanied with it as well?
I mean, when we think about what we've been talking about, I think that stuff is so irrelevant. I mean, I don't really care what these monsters do among each other and how they take each other to court. Like, it doesn't matter. We've got to stop thinking about them, right? That's the trouble with these criminals in power, is everybody thinks about them all the time. They think they're important. Every time you do that, you lose some of your own power, and we've got to take it back, right?
Yeah, good point. All right, so you're getting asked, do you know anything about the Black Eye Club?
Nope.
Okay. You're getting asked, what about Prince William? Has Charles had too much influence on him?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
Well, I think we've run out of all of the pertinent questions then, Kevin. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the viewers?
Well, like I mentioned at the start, there's alternatives, and folks listen in England, and I know you've got a lot of people watching there. Contact the Republic of Albion, because they're going to be doing what we've done in Canada, what the Americans are doing now, taking back their country, and take out citizenship. You then renounce your oath of allegiance to the crown, and you're living in a new jurisdiction. And I tell you, every time I show my citizenship card to cops in Canada, they back off. They know I'm not part of their system anymore. And you can start doing that in your own communities. So Republic of Albion at proton.me. They're great folks, wonderful people working on the ground in all sorts of communities. And that's how you carry it on, right? And make everything we've been talking about possible, right?
And don't forget, folks, all of Kevin's links, books, videos, contact are in the description box, and it's very important. He's risked his life multiple times, had multiple assassination attempts, poisonings. It's very important that we support his work. So thank you for coming back on, my friend. We wish you all the best in your endeavors, and you stay safe, Kevin. Cheers.
Cheers, brother. Thank you.
Cheers, brother. Thank you. Bye. What a phenomenal guest, folks. He's one of the most ballsiest people we have on. He just says it like it is, whereas others won't even go there. There's very few people I know who will go where Kevin goes. So, yeah, phenomenal guest. And what we've got next, what we've got coming up, Ron's doing a 6-hour ghost hunt at 10 p.m. UK, which is in 40 minutes. If you missed our podcast with Wyatt, who was a satanic defilement ritual survivor, which is going viral, we only put it up a few days ago. This video will take you to it. And then if you're interested in the Epstein client list, Nick Bryan is coming on tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK. Nick has released more information about Epstein than Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Trump. He got the black book out there, flight logs out there. He's a phenomenal guy. He wrote a book about the Franklin scandal, and he's coming on tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK. We have got the Epstein's Niece podcast approved and edited. It's going to be out probably Monday. And we've got Ari Ben-Menash, former Israeli intelligence, talking about Epstein and Maxwell working for Robert Maxwell, Mossad, CIA, everything. So loads of great content coming out in the next couple of days, guys. Thank you for tuning into this one. Thank you for all of your questions, and hope to see some of you tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK.